Nice. If you have your notes, you take those out with me. We are in a series. We're talking about following Jesus, and this morning we're in John chapter 12. So I kind of switched a couple chapters around. Dave Lux a few weeks ago spoke about John 11. Was anybody here for that week, Dave? Wonderful brother who serves as a missionary in Cameroon, Africa, and does an amazing thing, has translated much of the Bible, has literally created a language where there was no language. What a pleasure to have him with us. In John 11, he spoke about the incredible experience that a family had with Jesus. I love John 11 because it tells us so many things about the tenderness of God. One is that he wants to not just be your friend, he wants to be your family's friend. And so we have a collection of sisters and a brother. Remember who they were? We got Lazarus, the brother, and two sisters. Who were they? Martha and Mary. And they show up throughout Jesus' story several times. Remember we saw one time when Mary and Martha were entertaining and Jesus was in their home, and one of those sisters had kind of a work ethic spirit about her. Anybody kind of like that? You got kind of a work ethic thing going on in your life. You just are a worker. Yeah, that's kind of how Martha was. She was a worker. And she was a little frustrated, remember, with her sister Mary, because Mary was, she was reclining, she was resting at Jesus' feet, just kind of taking in his presence. And she went to Jesus with her frustration. She says, my sister's not sharing her part of the load. She's not carrying her weight around here. Would you please tell her to help me? And Jesus told Martha that Mary had chosen the better thing, to sit at Jesus' feet. And so right in that kind of first introduction to these sisters, we see that Mary is this worshiper. And so this morning our message is following Jesus into worship. And we're going to talk about what a powerful worshiper Mary was. And kind of get to see what we can learn from Mary so we can be better worshipers also. As the story kind of progresses, Jesus' time with them goes on. He takes his disciples on a little excursion to a place called Perea. And there they're doing ministry. And he gets word from this family. Some servants come and they say, it was sent by the sisters. And it says, Jesus, your friend Lazarus is sick. He needs you. So Lazarus had come down with some kind of illness that was not improving, was not looking better. And they knew that Jesus had healed so many people that surely just giving him the word, he would come back and heal. And Jesus stays in Perea with the disciples, stays on assignment, and then returns 4 days after Lazarus had passed away. So we're not exactly sure how much time that was, but his sickness went from bad to worse. He died. Jesus comes back, and the sisters meet him with both of them, separate occasions. Martha meets him kind of in the village. Mary meets him in Bethany where they lived. And both sisters, first words that came out of their mouth were, if you remember this, if you had been here, our brother would not have had to die. Didn't sound like, Jesus, how you doing? How was the trip? Right? It was they were a little frustrated. They were a little angry. So we know in grief, as we grieve, as we lose someone or something, anger is a natural part of that process. And so these girls, after 4 days, were past the denial place. Their brother had definitely died. And they were into that second stage of grief, which was anger, and that's the first thing to give to Jesus. And what was interesting to me about John 11 is that Jesus, instead of doing what he later did do, was just come to the healing moment, Jesus rather took a moment to empathize with these girls. And it says, the little shortest verse in the Bible, you know what it is. What is it? Jesus wept. And we see this picture of God weeping with these sisters before he brings anything else to the table. Says something about our pain, doesn't it? And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some of us today that has lost someone or something, and you need to realize and recognize that God is a God that wants to come alongside you and connect with your pain and weep with you in that moment, because that is a part of your humanity that is important, that God's wired you up to feel. When you deny those feelings, you deny God being able to heal those feelings. And some of us in our times of grief need to say, God, Jesus, would you just weep with me? Would you just make your presence known to me? And then Jesus goes on to raise Lazarus from the dead. Now that had to kind of shake things up a little bit, right? That's pretty amazing. So we come to John chapter 12 today, and it would have followed. John is kind of putting these things together because he wants us to kind of build understanding about this family and this connection. So let's learn the first, we're going to do the first 11 verses, so if you can follow along with me. It says, meanwhile, a crowd of I'm in Luke. No, that's not going to work very good. I said, that just does not look like the right one. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, I got one more gospel. Okay. There we go. There it is. 6 days before the Passover. So we've seen a lot of festivals going on here. We've seen Festival of Tabernacles, the Hanukkah festival. Now it's springtime and Passover is coming. 6 days before Passover. So things are approaching Christ's crucifixion because in a few days he's going to be crucified. Jesus arrived in Bethany, that's their hometown, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here, a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected, "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor?" Sounds like a pretty good objection, doesn't it? But John's going to give a little commentary here. It was worth about a year's wages, but he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus' response to Lazarus' objection. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she would save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and putting their faith in him. We'll pause there. So Lazarus was, a celebrity to some and a threat to others. And so we're going to see several things. So I want to unpack kind of a few things just about this family and this couple to kind of help us understand that they really got it. This family, they experienced who Jesus was, and they really got it. In the whole Gospel of John, you remember that I've said the entire Gospel has a central theme, and that central theme is coming into belief of Jesus as the Son of God. And if I don't believe he's the Son of God, I'm not going to know him very well. I'm certainly not going to be like him. I'm going to miss something. There's going to be a disconnect between faith, my belief in God, and my experience in God. When I connect those things and understand that he is God, he has power to do all kinds of things in my life as I relinquish that control to him. And Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, they got it. And so I want to just talk a little bit about what God it is. So the first little point in your notes is simply that, is that to get it, when you follow Jesus and begin to really trust him, you get it. You get it. Have you ever been in on an inside joke? Where only those who, were part of the family or part of the work group, the inside joke, they got it, but everybody else didn't get it. That ever happened? Right? On our trip to the Philippines a couple years ago, we had seen different things. And early on in the trip, we got there and just some amazing stuff happened. And someone said, they just had made this great exclamation. They said, "Wow, did you see that?" And from that point on, everything we saw that we thought was significant, everyone was saying, "Wow, did you see that?" And so throughout the entire trip, something cool would happen and somebody would go, "Wow." And we would all chuckle and the local people would just go, "What? What's that about?" Right? But our wow, you can even spell it backwards. Wow, we said it backwards. Wow, it was amazing. We saw all this stuff, and we were wowed. It was an incredible time. It was a great experience seeing God move and do all kinds of wonderful things. We had a massive time of folks coming in, about 1,000 people coming in and administering just healing and medication and supplies to them. Wonderful, wonderful thing. Wow, wow, wow. Whenever we're kind of on an inside joke, we've got something that someone else doesn't have because we get it. We understand the whole deal. The disciples didn't really get who Jesus was fully at this point in the story. But Mary and Martha and Lazarus, I believe, did. So let me tell you a little bit about that get it thing, but I want to make sure that you and I get it because sometimes it's difficult to know if you're fully on board with me. So I just want to say that if we get it that Jesus is God, I want you to make sure that we understand because so I'm going to say something, and if you get it, I'm just going to ask, do you get it? And you can say, "Got it," and then I'll know we're good. Is that fair? There was a young couple, little Asian couple, Mr. and Mrs. Wong, and they had a beautiful little baby, and they loved this little child. Gave birth, and the nurse came in to take the child and do some little measurements and things. Took the child out of the birthing room, did some measurements, and then brought back to them a little Caucasian baby. And the father says, "Oh no, 2 Wongs do not make a white." Did you get it? Got it. Good. Awesome. Awesome. There was a cowboy, and he wanted to get a dachshund. You know what a dachshund is? A little wiener dog. Wanted to get a dachshund because he always wanted to get a long little doggy. Did you get it? Good. You're awesome. You're awesome. Do you know what you get when you cross an elephant and a rhino? Elf-I-know. Did you get it? Good. You see, it's so good. So we're doing okay. So that's kind of how this is going to work. I'm just going to make some points, and then I'm going to ask if you get it. You're going to say, and we're good. Okay? Because whenever we understand that Jesus is God, all of a sudden things start to make sense to us. And we go, oh, that's why we need to do that. And I think Martha gets a lot of flack because she was a worker. But I just want to say this about Martha. I want to say that whenever you get it, you become someone who is a worker. There was something about Martha that understood there's a value in working for the kingdom of God. And when you really get it, number one in your notes, you really understand that being a worker is a good thing. And Martha was a worker, and I think that's fabulous. Because whenever we choose to be involved in God's purposes, we say, I will pick up the servant towel and I'll serve. And Martha got it, and she was a servant. You see, I think whenever people serve in our children's ministry or our youth ministry, and they come back week after week, and they meet with kids either on Sunday morning or Wednesday or Thursday night, and then plus that, many of them spend extra time with kids doing extra things. I think, man, they spend all that time. They must get it. I think they do. Do you get it? I mean, that's good because they get it. I'm so glad they do. When people serve week after week after week here, over and over and over again, why? So people can hear the message of grace, the message of God's goodness. They get it, and they want to serve. Martha was a worker because she got it. Lazarus was a witness. Lazarus got it because he was a witness. You think about Lazarus, and my goodness, at this point in Lazarus' life, he's even being threatened of murder himself because the authorities see him as a threat. But I think about his life, everything he was an amazing witness. I mean, you couldn't get any better witness than that. What's your story of knowing Jesus? Well, I was dead, and then I was alive. And it wasn't like he was unconscious for a little bit and we think he's dead. I mean, he died. They prepared his body for the grave. They wrapped it in the grave clothes. They stuck him in the grave, and he had been there 4 days, so much so when Jesus says, take the rock away, they said, Jesus, we respect you a lot, but that's not a good idea because he'll start to smell, right? I mean, at that point, there was not much faith in the room, but they said, you know what, we just soon not do that, Lord. It's not going to be pleasant. And he says, no, open that door. And then what did he do? He pulled the stone back and he said, Lazarus, come forth. Right? I wonder who was third and second and first. Did you get it? I just slipped out, didn't I? That was good. You're tracking with me really well. So Lazarus, right? He's coming out. He's all wrapped up. Out of here, please. That must have just been a classic moment. Crazy. Lazarus, come forth. See, Lazarus was a witness, an amazing witness, and ultimately God calls you and I to be witnesses. And you're saying, yeah, but I've not been dead and alive. Oh, I don't know about that. Colossians chapter 1, might be on the screen. Chapter 1 or chapter 3 of Colossians, verse 1 says, since then you've been raised with Christ. He's talking to people that are walking around. Since you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. He's saying, no, there is a spiritual death that you also need to experience. You need to die to who you are in your flesh and your old ways. And when that happens, God says he wants to raise you to a new life. And so if you've said yes to Jesus, guess what? Hopefully you have died, and you keep on dying to that part of you that wants to take control, take over, be boss, have control. Because when Jesus all of a sudden comes in and changes your whole perspective, the greatest witness is that it's not you, it's him. And Lazarus was an amazing witness. So amazing that Lazarus literally, all the stories that we have of this family, there's not one word recorded that Lazarus ever said. Not one word. I mean, not even wow. I mean, he thought, wow, this is great. You would have thought that something would have been recorded, but nothing from him. But yet he shows up in the text, and his witness was powerful now, and it was then, because he was a threat to all the institutional religion around him. Lazarus was an amazing witness. But Mary Mary that we want to focus really on the most today, she got it because she was someone who was a worshiper. Mary, we look at her life and we learn something about worshiping God. I love what Scripture tells us. Earlier in John chapter 4, it says, Jesus says, it's who you are and the way you live that count before God. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth. That's the kind of people the Father's out looking for. Those who are simply and honestly what? Themselves before Him in their worship. What I love about worshipers is worshipers don't have to try to pretend to be somebody else in front of God. They know they can just come as they are. Shortcomings, flaws, brokenness and all, and say, God, here I am. And God craves real worshipers that are willing to bring all their mess to a God that can turn their mess into a message for Him. God wants to do that in you, and He wants to do that through you if you'll be a worshiper. He's out looking for those kind of people. Do you get it? That's good. He wants the real you. He doesn't want you to have to wear a mask. Doesn't want you to have to pretend. But to come to Him and say, Lord, take all the things that I don't understand and make them understandable. God, give me clarity in the midst of my lack of clarity. Lord, help me to see what you want to do in my life. I surrender to you. I love the Old Testament tells us, for the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that He may strongly support those whose what? Hearts are what? Circle those words, completely His. I think about a lot of us, and I think oftentimes, we have a heart. We have a heart to follow God, but we have just kind of a half a heart. Have you ever seen somebody do something half-heartedly? You know what I mean? I mean, they're doing it, but you're just not real impressed with how they're doing it. You're thinking, oh my gosh, that looks kind of half-hearted to me. I don't think they're giving it their best shot. It just doesn't seem like it's there. Or maybe have you ever kind of caught yourself being half-hearted in the whole deal? And it's not really being all there. He says, those whose hearts are what? Because God says, I'm going to ready to support those whose hearts are completely His. Better give that guy an arm too. Guys, I want your heart to be completely mine. Jesus, when asked by one of the religious leaders in Matthew chapter 22, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said, love the Lord your God with half your heart, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, right? He said, I want all of you for me. And some of you are saying, I'm not sure this spiritual experience is really for me. And maybe it is for you, but it's not meeting your expectations because you've not brought your whole heart to the table. And God wants you to do that. And Mary was someone that brought her whole heart in. Everybody else may have come in with all kinds of secondary agendas, but Mary's agenda was pure, and she brings it to Jesus wholeheartedly. I've learned this thing about being completely His. It's like being completely there. My dad used to say something. My dad had all these kind of funny little statements, where they really weren't very profound. But he says, when you're sick, you don't feel good. That's true, Dad. Wherever you are, be all there. And that was, that's good, right? Wherever you are, be all there. Because a lot of times, have you ever been somewhere, but you know good and well you're not all there, right? And so your heart's not in it. You're not all there. I've learned that at home, whenever I go home to see my wife, after work, I give so much to work. And if I come home and I just, stack one lazy boy on top of the other, and, I'm out before, 8, she, for some reason, thinks I'm not all there. Right? I've learned that, that I need to walk in that door and say, this is as important a job as the job I have at the office. It's important as job as I have at home. I got to be all there. And I tell you, sometimes I struggle because sometimes I have a half a heart, and I got to say, I got to bring all my heart there. God says, I want the same thing from you. I want to bring your whole heart to me, all of me, bring it in. Because real worshipers just bring their whole heart. And the cool thing is we can recognize that my heart feels half full or half empty. It feels broken. It feels hardened. But I can bring it and say, Lord, this is really what it is. Would you change it and transform it? In the midst of worship, God can begin to change who you are. Because when you worship Him, you're surrendering to Him. And He wants you to do that. Mary shows us 4 things at least. I want 4 ways to show that you get it. Mary got it, and 4 ways I see that Mary got it in the text that apply to us. The first one is, whenever you get it, it'll humble you. Whenever you really get it that Jesus is God, it will humble you. And we think about this story of Mary in the 3rd verse. It says that Mary took about a pint of pure nard. Now I got a little quart jar here, so that would have been double, right? Quart jar, right? So 2 pints in a quart, right? So this would have been double the nard. No nard in there right now. And so the nard was an expensive perfume. It says in the text about a year's wages to have a pint of nard. But Mary would have had more than a pint of nard because it was a burial perfume. And so Mary had been saving up perfume for some time. Sometime she'd been saving this perfume, and she now was going to take it and she was going to use it on Jesus because Mary got something that I don't think the other disciples even got. Didn't even really register to them that Jesus' death was imminent. They still were entertaining other agendas. You see, most of the disciples came to Jesus and followed him with their own agenda, and it took their agenda crumbling for them to trust God's agenda. God will do that with us sometimes. We come with our own agenda for what God can do. But Mary didn't come with her own agenda. She came submitting to his. And so Mary comes in and she has a pint of pure nard, and the text tells us that she took the jar and she opened it up, opened up the expensive perfume. She poured it onto Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Must have been an amazing experience. Now, I want to describe the room a little bit. The room would have had probably, I would say, 16 to maybe 30 people in the room. We don't know exactly for sure, but the disciples were there, so we're assuming that probably nobody wanted to miss out, so probably all 12. Okay, we're hoping Judas was there, probably 12. You add Jesus to the mix and gives you 13, right? You add the two sisters and brother, and what do you got? 16? And then you add, other folks that were there. We know, look at another text, there was another fellow there by the name of Simon. There could have been other people there as well. So it's a pretty good size dinner engagement. You would have come in the room through a door that would have had a water basin and a towel at the door, because when they came in, it was customary that they would either have a servant there or you would wash your own feet, or a servant would wash your feet, and then you would go and you would recline at a table. And so they said recline at a table was different, right? They didn't have tables and chairs like we know them, so the tables would have been low, and so you would have reclined at the table like this. Mary was late to the party. She was probably doing something else, makeup. And Martha, I'm sure, was on time. Mary was late, so she comes in, and Mary bypasses the water, bypasses the towel. She comes over, and for all women, they would have been dressed in a similar way. They would have been fully covered from head to toe. The women, it was customary that they would put their hair up. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 15, it tells us that the woman's glory was her long hair. Her hair would have been probably here to maybe waist length. Some long hair. She comes over and everyone's kind of visiting and chatting. And all of a sudden Mary comes in and she takes her head covering off. That right away would have been kind of not customary. Everyone turns and goes, "What's this about?" Mary then, I don't know how she would have tucked her hair up. Maybe she pulled a single needle from her hair as it falls down. She bends over at Jesus' feet and she cracks open the jar. They've recognized the smell. In fact, maybe the other time they recognized it was when Lazarus came forth, because he would have been anointed. This would have been probably the second pint of perfume she opened in this month, because first she anointed her brother with perfume for his burial. Now she saved up another pint. Maybe there was 3 pints in the house, one for each of them. Maybe this was Martha's pint. And she said, "There's someone more important, Martha, than you." Maybe it was her own pint. And she pours it on Jesus' feet, and she bends over close enough to wipe his feet with her hair. You see, what I see in that is I see someone who's willing to be humble as humble can be. I have washed my wife's feet, but I haven't really washed many other people's feet. How about you? You're saying, I'm lucky to wash my own feet. You see, when they sit at that table, and aren't you glad that people would wash their feet if their feet were that close to the table, right? That was pretty important, right? Their feet were probably washed, but she wasn't washing his feet because they were dirty. She was washing his feet because they were holy. And she was anointing him with oil. Probably one of the most humble things a person could do. And everyone else was just kind of like probably jaw dropped watching this woman. But what's amazing to me is she passed up the towel and she became the towel. An ultimate act of service when God calls you and I not just to pick up the servant's towel, but to become the towel, to humble ourselves in whatever circumstance we are in, to say, God, I want you to work through me. I don't have to push this, God. I want you to use my submission to you, because it will make you submissive. If you're humble, it will make you submissive. You submit to God's control. You submit to God's reign. You submit to God's admonishments for us to do things in such a way that He gets honor for those things. And Mary was that kind of a woman. Why? Because she got it. Do you get it? It's good. Because He wants you and I to be servants too. You see, the person who really gets it is willing to do what the person who doesn't get it is not willing to do. And so those that come and they serve God's purposes over and over and over, why do they do that? Well, if they do it for the right reason, I promise you they do it because they get it, because He is God. His plans are bigger than their plans. And we come and say, God, I want to be a servant of your plans, not my plans. They do not compare, and they never will. The second thing I see in Mary's story, also out of verse 3, we're just going to focus on a little different aspect of the same verse. Mary took about a pint of pure nard, and it was an expensive perfume, and I got some of this perfume here. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped His feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance. So I got some spikenard. I couldn't get any real nard. Real nard is about $90 an ounce. I'm sorry, I didn't want to do that. Got spikenard for 10. A lot better deal, huh? I'm a good shopper. Okay, so it's pretty good. You want to smell this? Actually, check it out. It's pretty good stuff. I can anoint you with that sometime. Okay, it's pretty good, huh? Not right away. Did you try that, Kyle? Try that? Let's smell that. It's pretty good smelling stuff. So this would pour something similar to this all over the place. Anybody else want to smell some spikenard? Anybody else? Yeah? Anyone else? David? Good. She wants some right behind there, David. Don't drop it. It's $10. Good. Excellent. It's pretty good smelling stuff. So that would have just wafted in the whole room. And so it says that she spent, what would have been a year's wages. So for us, what is that? I mean, if you're in poverty, that's 20 grand. Considered poverty for us today is 20 grand. So anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 for that pint of spikenard. I mean, everybody's going, oh my gosh, what is she doing? And you see, what I want to tell you is whenever you get it, when you recognize that Jesus is God, it will cost you something. It will cost you something when you recognize that He's God and His plans are bigger than my plans. And when He calls you to His purposes, He's going to say, what do you bring to me that you're willing to lay down and contribute to my kingdom? Now don't be mistaken, because Pastor is not saying, I'm not saying that your salvation is at any of your expense, because Jesus paid it all. He paid it all. And so we come to salvation absolutely with no charge to us. It's a free gift. Billy Graham said it like this: salvation is free, but discipleship will cost you everything you've got. And so if I want to follow Jesus, that's what's going to cost me. And Mary got it. Do you get it? Good, and it's going to show. It's going to show by how generous we are, because it will make us, the next blank of your notes, that makes us generous whenever we get it, that it costs us something. We're saying, you know what, I want to contribute to God's kingdom. I want to contribute to His purposes. And so many of you have done such a beautiful job supporting, throughout the years. I mean, I can remember when we were in recession, and for years and years and years, our giving just was flat. I mean, just no increase to our giving at all. It was just flat. And as we've been coming out of that recession, you've just continued to give more, and our giving is the last few years, it's gone up each year, about 2 or 3% each year. That's because so many more of you are saying, you know what, I get it. I'm going to contribute to this. Over the last 3 years, we've done a thing every Christmas, and we've paid off our debt. We remodeled this facility. We're opening the Atwater facility in August. And all that because you get it. You're saying, I want to be a part of God doing great things, and I will be generous to His purposes and plans. Because when you get it, it's going to cost you something. You're saying, God, I want to be a part of that plan. It makes us generous. Why? I think you know it. The more you give, the more you get. The more you laugh, the less you fret. The more you do unselfishly, the more you gain abundantly. The more you love, the more you find that life is good and friends are kind. For only what you give away will enrich you from day to day. And when we get it, we say, I want to be generous. Because if you get it, you give it. If you get grace, really, you will give grace. If you give judgment, you got to ask, am I really receiving the grace that God has? Because if I'm giving away, judgment and condemnation, then there must be something I'm not getting in this picture, because God overflows in my life with grace, and so therefore I should overflow in the lives of others with that very same grace. Mary got it. And then she was willing to give it because she got it. The third thing that's very interesting is kind of the shift in the room. I mean, tensions rise. I mean, if it wasn't enough to watch Mary come in and let down her hair, and I think that's, it's kind of a sign that she got it as well. She's willing to kind of let down her hair, and some of us are just too stuffy for that. But she let down her hair and literally became the towel. But not everybody got it in the room that day. It says in verse 4, but one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. Can't you just hear his objection? This is a waste. We're wasting money around here. And just kind of get that feeling that, oh my gosh, yeah, this is really... And what's interesting is not just that Judas was kind of upset here and bothered, but it's interesting. I want you to look at another text. In Matthew chapter 26, there's a parallel passage. So a parallel passage is where one of the synoptic gospels, and so remember in the synoptic gospels, it's a lot of parallelism, a lot of the same stories. Not so much in John's gospel, not a lot of those in the other gospels, but this story occurs here too. Look at this. In verse 6 it says, when Jesus was in Bethany, so everything on the time frame shows us this is the same account from a different vantage point, from Matthew's perspective. While Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of a man who was known as Simon the leper. Now, so some folks have asked, Pastor, why are all these, there's little differences, which one of these passages is accurate and right? In John's passage, he never tells us whose home is at. He just said that Martha and Mary were there serving. Okay, so he never tells us whose home. In Matthew wants you to know whose home it was. It was Simon the leper. And I think that's kind of interesting. You think that's quite a title. Could be Bill the leper, Steve the leper, Simon the leper. So what were lepers? Now, I guarantee you that something happened in Simon's life for all these people to want to come to his house for a party, because if he were still a leper, no one would want to come to his party, right? Because they're afraid that things might fall apart, right? And so he was just, he was healed. I mean, he was one of the lepers that Jesus embraced. We talked last week, right, about Jesus including the excluded. Here's a story of that. Here's a guy who had been excluded his entire life, that he had known this disease, and all of a sudden Jesus heals this disease, and now he's throwing a party, and guess who he invites? He's thinking of, who should I invite to my party? Oh, the guy that was raised from the dead. I'm going to invite him. Lazarus. So Lazarus is there, Mary's there, disciples are there. So all of a sudden we get a little bigger feel for this party. Okay, a woman came to him. Matthew doesn't even really say her name. A woman came to him with an alabaster jar full of expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. And you're going, wait a second. Matthew says he poured it on his head, and John said he poured it on his feet. Which did he do? She probably poured it all over Jesus. Have you ever been in a room and you're on one side of the room and somebody else is on the other side of the room, and there's 18 people in between? And you're kind of, something's happening in the middle, and you're trying to look around and see what's going on? And so Matthew caught one perspective and John caught another. John was the one that the upper room was leaning on Jesus' breast, it says. And John had this kind of inclination to describe himself as the one Jesus loved. I bet you John was close. And so Mary may have come in and done a little anointing on Jesus' head, and then she drops to her knees and pours it on his feet and lets down her hair. And John was right in the front row, seeing it all. And Matthew's going, what in the world's going on over there? So the stories have little nuances of difference about them. When the disciples saw this, now look at this. When who? When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This perfume could have been sold for a high price and the money given to the poor. Sounds an awful lot like the objection that Judas had. You're saying, so which was it? Did Judas make the objection, or did the disciples make the objection? Here's my proposal. Judas primed the pump and the disciples joined in the flow. Has that ever happened to you? Has anybody ever complained about something and you jumped on the bandwagon? It's exactly what happened here. All of a sudden, yeah, that's a good point. Let's all join in on that parade. And so now everybody is pointing out what Mary could have done wrong. Jesus, aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. This poor woman, you will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this expensive perfume on my body, she was preparing it for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of who? Of her. Not just Jesus, of her, of Mary. That Mary will be remembered for what Mary has done. Here's the point. When you get it, it will confound those who don't get it. When you get it, it will confound those who don't get it. They will watch you give heart and soul and money and all that you've got to God's purposes. And they'll go, why in the world are you doing that? I don't get it. You could be out doing so many other things. Why would you do that in the church? Because we get it. And when you get it, all of a sudden your worship is brought to the table and you're saying, God, I want to do more, give more, be more for you. Why? Because I get it. And you will have family members that stand back and go, I don't get it. You'll have friends and neighbors look and watch and say, I don't get it. But when you recognize that it cost you something, that it humbles you for an amazing reason, because it breaks your heart that He took your sin, but it lifts your heart because you can live again. When you get it, you'll recognize that some of those around you don't get it, and it will confound them. Do you get it? That's good. Because when you try to understand Jesus with all your heart, don't be surprised that some others will not understand. When you try to understand with all your heart and all your life, don't be surprised that some others just won't get it and they just won't understand. I think it's kind of interesting. I just kind of thought about this for a little bit, and I just kind of started doing a little contrast between Mary and Judas. So I don't know if this can come up if they've got the little thing, but just a few things about this in terms of the contrast. Mary was kind of a God's way woman, and Judas was a my way kind of guy. I mean, Judas wanted his way. You see, Judas had an agenda, of his own, and Mary, but it was different. And Mary, she did get it. Judas didn't get it. Mary was generous. Judas was judgmental. Mary became someone with a beloved name. Any Marys in the house? Any Marys in the house? Hey, Mary's in the house. Mary's in the house. Mary, quite contrary. There's a couple of them. There's Mary's over here. Any Marys? Mary's another. There's Mary over here. How many Marys? Marys. How many of you know a Mary? Come on, raise those hands. How many know more than one Mary? Wow, look at that. Okay, hands down. How many know a Judas? Is anybody named Judas in the house? Is there any Judases here today? Judas. It's interesting, you got baby books with all the names in them. They even took Judas out of the baby book. Why? Because nobody wants to remember him. Right? Nobody wants his name. But Mary is one of the most popular names we got. Why? Because her story lives on. And Judas' story, it lives on, but it's not in infamy. And it certainly isn't one we want to cherish and say, gosh, I think I'll name this child Judas. Pretty amazing contrast between Mary, because you will be misunderstood. You will be misunderstood as a follower of Jesus. The last thing is that it says, Jesus speaks up and says, leave her alone. Jesus replied, this was intended that she should save this perfume circle for the day of my burial. Mary may have been the only one at that dinner engagement who got it. She understood that what Jesus had been saying was culminating into the Passover, where the Lamb of God, where the Lamb that represented the deliverance from Israel would be slain again in celebration of that event, that Jesus would be the ultimate Lamb, and He would be slain. I think Mary's maybe the only one that got it that night. And for several days, the disciples were just kind of clueless to what Jesus had been saying, but Mary wasn't clueless because she had taken that beautiful, expensive perfume, and she knew it was for burial. And Jesus was going to die. It would be like saying, you know what, I know someone who's terminally ill, and I'm going to bring my flowers before the funeral because I get it. Because He is going to die for me. I don't know if Mary understood that resurrection was coming, but she understood sacrifice was. And she got it. And what happened to Mary was she recognized if Jesus could sacrifice His life for me, she could sacrifice her agenda for His. Judas, in contrast, said, if Jesus can't sacrifice Himself for my agenda, I'm not going to sacrifice myself for His. And so Judas took the route of abandoning the band of followers because Jesus wasn't going to try to overthrow Rome. That was Judas's agenda. You see, when you get it, you're willing to adjust to God's plans. You're willing to align yourself to God's plans and say, you know what, it's not about my plans, it's about His plans. And sometimes I can think that I got my plans all figured out, but God says, I want you to align to mine. And so if you get it, there's something about a spirit of submission and humility that accompanies a real worshiper. There's something about a willingness to say, I'm willing to pay more. It's going to cost me something. I want to be generous about a real worshiper. There's something about a realization that not everybody's going to understand my abandoning heart to Him. That I got to make a decision. Will I adjust to God's agenda or will I force mine? A.W. Tozer said, great little quote that I got to have the first word to get right. He said, the deeper Christian life is the realization that we've got is the willingness to quit trying to use the Lord for our ends and start doing what? Ends, and let Him work in us for His glory. Mary got that. And she was saying, God, I want to be used for your glory, not for my ends. I want to encourage you just to bow your heads with me right now and just to think about if you get it. And you've said, I got it over and over this morning. And I hope you have. I hope that it's made sense and you do get it and you've got it. And you're going to walk out saying, oh, Lord, how can I worship you more? How can I, Lord, take a posture of a servant? How can I, Lord, begin to embrace all the things that you want to do and say in me and through me? Because, Lord, I want it to be about you and not about me. I get it. And Lord, I want to have my heart filled with more of your grace so it flows more freely out of my heart to others. God, I want to trust you more and surrender more. I'm willing to count the cost of what it means to follow you, Jesus. And so I bring my all to you. Lord, you are the holy and anointed one. And Lord, I want to bring my life as a poured out offering, Lord, that anoints your purposes and your plans. And for the things, Lord, that I want to try to control in my life, Lord, I want to bring them and open my hands and say, God, would you show me your way? That your plans are not always my plans. And your ways are not always my ways. Because your ways are higher than the heavens. Your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. And so I want to simply submit whatever it is, whatever you have angst over in your life right now. What is that angst about? Maybe it's something with your kids and you're trying to control them and make them do something and make them be something. And you just need to open your hands and say, Jesus, I just want to have you anoint my kids with your presence. I want to anoint them with the oil of your Spirit. Maybe it's your marriage, and your marriage isn't doing what you think marriages should do, and you'd love just to be able to take them by the throat and straighten them out. But the Lord's saying, I want you to serve them. You can set healthy boundaries. You can be safe, but I want you to serve them. Find ways to serve that person that you want to be more engaged, more committed. Just show them your commitment. Those that don't understand you, you don't have to fight them back. You don't have to compete with them. As Jesus said that we can love our enemies, then we can certainly love someone that misunderstands us. Ask Him, Lord, help me to garner the strength of your presence to give away what I sometimes don't feel like I have to give. Lord, help me to let down my hair and be myself with you and trust you more with all the broken places of my heart. His love never fails, never runs out. It's here for you this morning. It'll be here for you this evening. It'll be here for you tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening and throughout the week. His love never fails. He's the holy and anointed one. And all He wants is more and more and more and more of your heart. Just bring it to Him as we close the service. Let's sing this song and just whisper to Him, Jesus, I give you all my heart. If you feel like there's any sense that you do not know Him, that He doesn't dwell in your heart, then Jesus said He's right here, right there. He's knocking on it, maybe even in this moment. He says, you can open your heart and I'll come in. I'll fill you with my presence. Just whisper to Him, Jesus, fill me with your presence. I need to know you, God. Be my Lord and Savior. Take my sin debt. God, I want that no condemnation. I want a heart that's freed from guilt and shame. Fill me, Jesus. Not just so I can sense your presence, but so I can reflect your presence. Jesus. Let's sing his name. Jesus, holy and anointed one. Jesus, 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 holy and anointed one. Jesus, honey on my lips, water to my soul, is a lamp unto my feet. Jesus, I love you. I love you. Jesus, sing it out to him. Jesus, holy and anointed one. Jesus, honey on my lips, spirits like water to my soul. What is a lamp unto my feet? Jesus, I love you. I love you. I love you. Oh, I love you. Jesus, I love you. I love you. Do you love him this morning? Do you get it? That's good. Lord, take our hearts, Lord. Some of them are broken and calloused. Some of them have been closed. But Lord, this morning we recognize that we want to bring whatever the condition of our heart is to you and say, Lord, thank you for loving my heart unconditionally. And I need you, Lord, to change my heart. Change our hearts, oh God. We just lift them to you. Change our hearts, oh God. Make us people that are not proud, but filled with humility. Help us not be blinded by our own subjectivity, but Lord, welcome your perspective. But help us to be people that are so generous that others would be surprised and shocked by our generous words and deeds and how we give away our resources. God, help us not be deterred or defrayed by those that don't get it. God, help us to align our agenda with yours. Thank you, Jesus. Just one more time. Just sing that one more time. I want you to lift your heart with your hands. Give it up to him. Say, Lord, take my heart. Lord, make it more like you because I get it.